you really enjoyed The Pale Blue Eye and you're looking for more books with that gothic, dark academia feel to them, stay tuned because I'm going to be counting down my top 5 recommendations for books that feel similar to The Pale Blue Eye. Pale Blue Eye is a mystery thriller film that was recently released on Netflix. It is inspired by the novel with the same name that was published in 2003. And in this film, you are following veteran detective Augustus Landor, who is investigating a series of grisly murders that are happening at the US Military Academy in the 1800s. He quickly befriends a cadet who will help him solve the case, and that character is none other than the soon-to-be author Edgar Allan Poe. While this is a fictionalized story, it does follow some true accounts of Edgar Allan Poe's life, since he was indeed at the US Military Academy at this point in his life. Throughout the film, you're following him working with Detective Landor to try to understand why fellow cadets keep ending up murdered with their hearts carved out of their chests in a way that seems like there may be some connection to the occult or the supernatural. If you like atmospheric gothic stories, this is definitely the film for you. It is a long stretching story. It runs over 2 hours, but it is so atmospheric and it pulls you into the mystery and makes you feel like you're working with the detective yourself as you're trying to puzzle together why these cadets keep ending up brutally murdered. I thought the film was really good, a little slow, but that comes with the territory of the type of story that it was telling, and I thought it had a really great plot twist at the end. So if you're like me and you also enjoyed it and you're looking for some more books with that gothic atmosphere or the dark academia setup of this murder mysteries going on at an academy, I have 5 book recommendations for you. We're going to be counting down all the way down to my number 1 recommendation for the book most similar to The Pale Blue Eye. Coming in at number 5 is The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein by Kirsten White. This is a story that is inspired by Frankenstein, but it puts the focus on Elizabeth. When Elizabeth was a child, she was taken in by the Frankenstein family and she became very good friends with Victor. As a woman in these times, Elizabeth did not have much of a future ahead of her unless she were to find a man who she could marry to help carry her through life, and Victor was that person for her. She grew very close to him. He was kind of her protector and her only hope at a future. But as they grow older, Elizabeth starts to see more and more of Victor's dark side, his dark temper, and his proclivities towards some not great things. And then he ends up going missing and she has to go try to find him so that she can still secure her future. This story has a lot of great gothic atmosphere to it. It does more center on the story of this woman finding her empowerment in society, so it is quite different from The Pale Blue Eye in that way, but if you're really looking for a book with more great gothic atmosphere and some monstrous characters in it as well, then definitely recommend picking this one up. Coming in my number 4 spot is Ghost of Harvard by Francesca Saratella. In this story, you're following Cadence Archer, who is going to Harvard to follow in her brother's footsteps. Previously, her brother Eric attended Harvard. He ended up having a really hard time and he actually ended up committing suicide, but she believes there might be more to the story. The story that's being told about his death is that when he went to Harvard, he ended up developing schizophrenia. He was hearing things and seeing things, and they're tracing his journal entries, and that is what drove him to madness and drove him to suicide. But she thinks that there might be more to the story because that doesn't sound like something her brother Eric would do. As she follows in his footsteps and attends Harvard and investigates more of the circumstances around his death, she starts experiencing similar things, seeing and hearing things that don't seem to really be there. This is a mystery revolving around the true circumstances behind Eric's death. You're following his sister as the investigator who is trying to piece together the puzzle. There are potentially supernatural circumstances coming into the story as well, and it's also a story that is just very heavy with a lot of grief to it. If you particularly enjoyed the elements of The Pale Blue Eye around the potential supernatural implications behind what was going on, then I would definitely recommend this one as well, because it definitely toes the line a lot with the potential supernatural effects that are coming into the story and digging into the history around all of that as well. In my number 3 spot is Anatomy, a Love Story by Dana Schwartz. This is a gothic mystery with some romance elements and some anatomical elements as well. In this story, you're following a young woman named Hazel who wants more than anything to become a surgeon. In her world, that's not a typical path for women, but she is determined to make it happen, and she ends up making an arrangement with a professor that if she can pass his exam, she will be able to become a surgeon. The problem is, because she's a woman, she can't get the official training, and she's going to have to take the medical examination on her own, so she's going to need some corpses to practice with. Enter Jack, a resurrection man who's just trying to do what he has to do to survive, who has a lot of experience with digging up graves. Meanwhile, while the two are working together to try to help educate Hazel, there's also people going missing and a mystery to solve. If you really like the elements of The Pale Blue Eye that really leaned into the gothic romance romance part of the story as well, then I would definitely recommend trying this one out. It is more of a young adult story, but it has a lot of adult themes, so I feel like it works really well for adults as well. And it's also got that great gothic atmosphere. In my number 2 spot is What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. This is a story that is inspired by Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher, so it is a perfect recommendation if you really enjoy the Poe elements of The Pale Blue Eye and you're looking for more Poe-esque type stories. The writing in this one also feels incredibly similar and reminiscent of Poe's writing, so if you have experience reading Poe's writing, or if you really like the language Poe uses and get really drawn into his character in The Pale Blue Eye, I definitely recommend giving this one a shot as well. If you're familiar with The Fall of the House of Usher, the synopsis of this one will sound similar. You're following Alex Easton, a retired soldier who receives a call to go visit their childhood friend Madeline Usher. Madeline appears to be dying and she's behaving incredibly strangely, and there are also some strange things going on at the grounds of the house, particularly with some fungi. I will say this wasn't personally my favorite book. I actually ended up sitting it down around halfway through because I just wasn't super into the story, but I would be remiss to not add this on the list of Poe-esque type stories. It's the perfect book to pick up if you really enjoyed The Pale Blue Eye. It just personally wasn't for me at the time that I was reading it. But I know a lot of people really love this one, and from my experience with as much of it as I read, there are so many similarities in the feel of this book that you get from The Pale Blue Eye, so it's potentially one I would even consider revisiting. And in my number 1 spot for my number 1 recommendation for the book that I think you should pick up if you really enjoyed The Pale Blue Eye, we have The Devil in the Dark Water by Stuart Turton. This story has so many similar components to The Pale Blue Eye, and they're all components that I love. You have the historical setting with that gothic feel to it. This book is actually set in the 1600s, so it even dates back a little farther than The Pale Blue Eye. You have a detective duo who is coming together to solve the case, who have 2 very different personalities and experiences in life, but they're coming together to try to puzzle together what's happening. And you also have that question of, is there something paranormal going on, something related to the occult, something even related to the devil? This story is set in 1634 on the high seas as this famous detective is being transported to Amsterdam to potentially face execution for a crime that he has committed. He is also being accompanied by his bodyguard, Arndt, who does not believe that the detective actually did what he's being accused of doing. Before the ship departs, there is this ominous dark omen that there is something devilish going on the boat, and then as they begin their journey, strange things keep happening which make it seem like that may be true. People are hearing whispers, there are strange symbols being marked, there are livestock being slaughtered, and then 3 passengers are marked for death, including the detective himself. The problem is the detective can't do the investigating because he is shackled up as a prisoner, so his bodyguard Arndt has to be the one to try to solve the case. I absolutely loved the rich mystery of this story paired with the wonderful atmosphere. It has all of the best elements of The Pale Blue Eye packed into this book as well. So truly, if you love The Pale Blue Eye, I definitely recommend picking up The Devil in the Dark Water by Stuart Turton. So that is it for my top 5 book recommendations for books that are similar to The Pale Blue Eye. Let me know down in the comments below if you plan on picking any of these up, and let me know if you have any additional recommendations that I did not mention on my list that could either be recommendations for myself or other people reading the comments down below. Also, let me know if there are any other movies on your radar that you would like to see me do a similar recommendation list for in the future, and I will check those out as well. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye!